So here's something I've done before, but I think it's funny, so I'm going to do it again. I want to take you through the evolution of the Democrat statements and arguments about the election allegations of fraud. All right, day one, we think your election was fraudulent, say the Republicans. So the Democrats sort of, as one, said some version of this. There was no fraud. It isn't even possible to cheat. Not only was there no fraud, but it's not even possible. Wasn't that the first thing that every Democrat said? Then some evidence started to, or at least allegations of evidence started to surface, and then the story softened a little bit. And it turned from there was no fraud and it's not possible to, okay, there was some fraud, but no one is alleging that there was enough fraud to change the election, so just let it go. And then it turned into, okay, there might be, okay, we understand now that the allegations are not that it is, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Okay, there might be some fraud, but it's not widespread. So it went from there's none to, okay, there's a little fraud, but it's not widespread. And then, of course, Republicans explained that the accusation was not that it was widespread, but rather that it was focused in the swing states and very targeted. Eventually, that message got through, and the Democrats' response evolved a little bit more, and now it turned into, all right, okay, we understand that the allegations are not that it was widespread, but rather targeted in swing states, but you keep moving the goalposts. I mean, before you said it's widespread, now you're saying it's targeted. Moving the goalposts. You're moving the goalposts, except nobody moved the goalposts. It was always that it was targeted at the places where it mattered. But it's still baseless. Still baseless. You move the goalposts, and it's baseless. People who move the goalposts, they don't have an argument. All right, so then it evolved to, okay, all right, Trump's lawyers are now alleging that there's enough fraud that would change the election. Okay, we'll give you that. There are enough allegations that if they were true, it would change the elections. But it's not been proven in court. Not been proven. Not been proven in court. And then that evolved into, okay, you have hundreds of witnesses, and you've got tons of data analysis showing anomalous results in swing state cities. You've got sky-high motivation to cheat and lots of opportunity, but it hasn't been proven. So while these things are true, lots of witnesses, hundreds of them, of fraud, tons of data analysis that looks pretty solid, and lots of opportunity and motivation, but it hasn't been proven. And then related to that is, well, Trump lost whatever the number is today, 38 lawsuits in a row. I'm just making that up. I think that's in the neighborhood, though. He lost 38 lawsuits in a row. Ha, 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 ha. And if he lost 38 lawsuits in a row, I mean, that's all you need to know, right? And then here's a little factoid for you that Attorney Robert Barnes said. He said prior to the Supreme Court decision on Bush versus Gore, every federal court and every state Supreme Court had ruled for Gore over Bush every time until the Supreme Court. And then it reversed. So as Robert Barnes points out, he says the election contests only start next week because all the early stuff just sort of doesn't count. It's all about getting to the Supreme Court, and it looks like they will. So if you thought that any of those minor court lawsuits getting tossed out mattered, they don't. Not only that, but they were different claims with different evidence, or as the judge would say, lack of evidence. So does history repeat if the situation is different? The whole point of history repeating is that it's got to be the same situation. But Democrats have decided that history repeats when the thing that's repeating doesn't have any correlation, except in words, they're both called lawsuits, I guess, to the two things. And they still think history is going to repeat. That's not logical. These are just different things. One does not predict the other. No matter how many lawsuits are ever lost in a court, that doesn't mean the next one's going to lose. They're not connected. They're different lawsuits. All right. Now, of course, I think Democrats may be starting to realize, and I think Janet Ellis said this too, some version of this. I'm going to use my own words for it, so don't blame her if this is wrong. But that the lawsuits were really about keeping the argument alive and stalling and trying to get some delay on the certification of the vote. So when the Democrats say, hey, you were just flailing with these weak cases, I don't think the Republicans disagree with that. They wouldn't use the word flailing, but I don't think they disagree that these were weak, quickly prepared cases that were just thrown into the system. It's just that the strategy was not to win those. The strategy was to inject doubt, maybe get a delay, keep the argument alive in the mind of the public, make it look like there's lots of smoke, so there must be fire. Did it accomplish those things? Well, it certainly accomplished the latter, which is make you think there's a lot going on. All right. So here's where I think they are today. So I think they've evolved all the way from there was no fraud and it's not even possible. They've evolved all the way, okay, history doesn't repeat in terms of these lawsuits. That's true. If they're different kinds of suits. And sure, Trump lawyers have hundreds of witnesses, tons of data analysis showing anomalous results in swing states. They've got sky-high motivation and lots of opportunity, but I don't see you citing any proof. So this is the one that happened today. Somebody on social media alleged the election was fraudulent, and a Democrat said, you're not citing any proof. So it went from there is no proof, no, it went from it didn't happen to there's no proof to you're not citing the proof. That's a big difference from it's impossible to you haven't shown me or there is no proof to you're not citing it in your tweet. Because you know, they're tweets. You don't really cite a lot of evidence, although you could and you should. All right. Here are some of the mistakes of logic that they're making, which I talk about in my book, Loser Think, which you should buy as a gift for somebody you love for Christmas. It's available everywhere the books are sold. And on page 143, I talk about a thing called word thinking, where you try to use words to convince people that there's an argument, but it's really just a combination of words. So for example, the word baseless, which I've talked about, is trying to make an argument by word choice. There's no argument. They're trying to make you think there is just by the choice of words. Baseless and widespread. And then on page 67 of Loser Think is the idea that history doesn't repeat, especially if the situation is different, and it's always different. So these lawsuits are obviously don't predict, the bad ones don't predict what happens with the later ones. And then of course, there's plenty of straw manning going on here that is so common and dumb, I didn't even include it in my book about bad thinking. The straw man idea where somebody makes a claim A, and instead of defending against claim A, you just act as if they said claim B, and you defend that because it's easier to defend. That's straw manning. You're just pretending somebody said something else so you can defend the other thing because you can't defend the actual thing. So that's what the widespread thing is. So the claim is that there's specific fraud in just the right places, and what they say when they defend is like, well, there's no widespread. There's no widespread claim. So that's just straw manning by changing the argument.